This podcast describes events that may be disturbing to some listeners, including violent assault and stalking. Please take care while listening. You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. Welcome back to Season 10, You Killed Chris, A Friend's Fight for Justice. This is Episode 2.
She had no real intentions of staying at Madison that long either.
I was so frightened, I'd run in, take the test, and then run out.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
Law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
There it was, Christine Rothschild, murdered on campus.
Last time we met a few people, including Linda Schulko, Christine's friend from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Linda has made it her life's quest to uncover the truth behind her friend's murder. Over the years, Linda has tirelessly questioned, researched, and investigated this case. She has conducted interviews with Christine's family and friends, law enforcement officials, university staff, and others. We will hear from Linda again shortly, but first, here is Sarah again, one of Christine's dorm mates at Emery Hall. Sarah remembers life at the beautiful 5-story dorm building on Langdon Street.
I really did love it. I felt like I belonged there. It was like a cozy place to live because it was an older building with all the charm.
Both Sarah and Christine lived on the first floor. They both had single private rooms. Sarah's window looked out the front of the building towards Langdon Street.
And Christine lived on that floor also, but down the hall. So you would have walked in, you would have turned left, and my room was on the front, and then you go down the hall, and Christine's room, I believe, was like in the middle of the hall, down that hall, facing east, which would have kind of faced the Capitol building.
While the showers and bathrooms were communal, the simple single rooms had the basic necessities a college student might need.
It had a chest of drawers that was built in, and then there was a mirror that was built in, and there was a bed, a closet, and the windows were pretty big, and because it was an older building, they were windows you could open. Because we were on the first floor, it's possible that somebody on the outside could come up to the window and look in or talk to you from the window.
Despite those free-spirited times, these young adult women at Emery Hall were not exactly free. They couldn't just come and go as they pleased. They had a curfew. That's right, they were expected to be home by a certain time, including on weekends. Of course, there were ways around that.
I remember I was dating some young man, and when I wanted to stay out later than whatever the curfew was, I would spend the night at my brother's house, who lived in Shorewood Hills, if I wanted to stay out later than the curfew.
And speaking of curfews and dating, Christine Rothschild went on some dates too during her time there, but she never had a boyfriend. Her friend Linda recalls.
She had to know she was very pretty. She had to know that. There was no doubt about it. I mean, she had beautiful skin. She was blonde. She wore her hair in a flip. She had gorgeous clothing. Her sister had sewn everything, and her sister was in the School of Design in Chicago. She never was conscious of this. She was just focused on going where she was going, having her cigarette, smiling if somebody said hi, and letting it go. In fact, when she used to date, it wasn't these let's go here, there, and everywhere, and then have a few drinks, and then I'll walk you back to your dorm. It'd be like she'd always focus on something like going to a show or going to some kind of exhibit or to some kind of thing that was going on campus where they'd have a live performance where you had to buy tickets and a dance. And oftentimes she would even purchase the tickets and just invite somebody. And I always said to her, I said, how do you get these guys off of you at the end of the night? I'm thinking, well, maybe we could go one step further, because it was a very liberal campus. And she says, I give everybody a kiss on the cheek or a kiss on the forehead, and I say good night. And I know that for a fact because I've talked to some of the guys she dated. And they were like, swooning for her almost. And not because she was pretty necessarily. She was kind and good-natured and sweet and genuine. And I think that they saw something special in her beyond, many people did, beyond her looks. And, but she was not going to get involved with anybody. And, she had no real intentions of staying at Madison that long either.
In fact, Christine never had any intention of attending the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the first place. According to Linda, it was Christine's mother who had insisted on UW. Perhaps this is why Christine almost seemed to resent her life and surroundings there in Madison.
It was ironic because she lived right on the very edge of Langdon Street. And after leaving her dorm, it's probably all different now, but it used to be all sorority and fraternity, like old mansions that were converted over to these fraternities and sororities. And it went on for, I'm going to say, a few blocks. And she was right on the edge of all of that. And she was in a top dollar dorm. I mean, Ann Emery was private dorm, and it was very expensive. She really hated the sorority and fraternity activity that she would see. She hated literally State Street with the drinking and all of the activities on campus that would say like free beer and everything, or come and this and that, and people were smoking joints all over. I mean, it was all around us. We were in that environment, and she didn't really identify with very much there, except I think the quality of her courses and the beauty of the campus.
Linda, on the other hand, loved UW. She felt it was the big academic institute that she needed and wanted and had strived and worked so hard for all through grade school and high school. Linda recalls that on this topic, Christine would respectfully disagree with her.
I tell her, I love this campus. I'd say, I love the old buildings. I love, that there's so much faculty. I'm not crazy about all the students, but the course selections and all that were just phenomenal for me. And she agreed, but she would always tell me, she said, I really hate UW. She said, I'm not trying to burst your bubble, but she said, I really hate UW. She said, I never wanted to be here. And she said, my goal is really, I've always wanted to go to Vassar. And she says, I know we have a good journalism program here, and I'm going to make the best of it, but not my end point is what it came down to.
Linda explains that while Christine's mother ran a pretty tight ship in the home, her father had a different nature about him.
I think it was like a shoulder to cry on and to share her secrets with and so forth, and her thoughts and her dreams. I think that's more or less. Her mother was more of a social highlight person, where you were proper and you were in the right society and you looked the right way and you knew the right people and you did the right things and you had the right opportunities. And the combination is good. I mean, I can't say that that's a bad combination. It's got its benefits, but I don't think her mother really understood her. Chris wanted to be independent. She wanted to go to a school, not because of its name or whatever. She wanted to go where she thought the quality of education was best for her future career and her life. She really wanted to go to Vassar for several years before she even started college. But her mother wouldn't let her go because she wanted her daughter close to home. Her mother wanted her within an easy return distance of Chicago. And the friction built quickly after Chris came to Madison.
During that fall of 1967, as the tension between Christine and her mother escalated, with her mother insisting that she remain at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a different kind of pressure was mounting across the country. And this national tension was evident right there in Christine's own backyard, too, on the UW campus. Nationwide, universities had been hotbeds of demonstrations protesting the United States involvement in Vietnam. And up until October of 1967, and very much in contrast to the many civil rights protests and riots that previous summer, these campus gatherings had remained peaceful and void of violence. However, this calm was on the brink of disruption. The whole situation was poised for a catalyst, and on October 18th that year, that catalyst emerged at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And it all started with something that at first glance sounds harmless enough, when an organization came to Madison to recruit graduates to come and work for them. No, this organization was not the Army or Navy or Marines or Air Force. It wasn't the FBI or the CIA either. Nothing like that. It was a company named Dow Chemical. What occurred on the UW campus on that now infamous day has since been dubbed Dow Day.
I knew very few people who had anything positive to say about the war.
This is Jane May Dale. In October of 1967, she was a graduate student working towards her PhD at UW.
In Madison at the time, the Dow Chemical Company used to come to the campus to recruit people who were graduating to come work at the Dow Chemical plant. And Dow Chemical was making napalm. And napalm was being dropped in bombs by the United States into Vietnam and setting fire to the trees and the greenways and everything, all the things in North Vietnam. And people were getting caught in the fire. And people were getting burned and dying because we were dropping fire bombs. And a lot of people on the campus were very angry about Dow Chemical coming to recruit on campus.
And so many students, including Jane, expressed their opposition to the university being in any way associated with Dow Chemical.
We tried to talk to the dean of students, and while he was willing to listen to us, the university was not willing to prohibit Dow Chemical Company from coming.
And so the students decided to do something about it.
We took over the first floor of the administration building and were not letting anybody come in. The police came in with batons and they pushed people out of the building. There were a lot of people who were injured. And, everybody was hanging out at the back of the building. The police were arresting anybody who they thought was a leader. This shows you how unexperienced we were when we did this thing. We moved some tables to the back door so the police couldn't get in the back door. And then the police come in the front door and they start swinging their clubs and we can't get out the back door. So people were climbing over the table and under the table and the police is just swinging. And, needless to say, there was a lot of people with bloody heads. I mean, they didn't even swing at bodies. They were swinging at heads. I mean, we saw people getting their heads bashed.
Linda Schulkel remembers Dow Day as well.
I was walking from one of the small libraries in one of the rooms back to my dorm, and I was oblivious at initially what was going on as to why. And I had never seen anything so catastrophic or dramatic in my life. I mean, thousands of students all there screaming and yelling and throwing things and chanting and so forth. And I went straight back to my dorm, and it was brutal. But Chris and I never, and we talked about it later because we weren't together that particular day or anything, but neither one of us ever participated in anything related to demonstrations because I don't think it was our nature. And secondly, I think that we weren't followers. We didn't well, if the crowd is doing it, let's just join in. So unless it had been a private issue of something we'd want to address to somebody personally, I don't think we had the right personalities, perhaps, to be part of that kind of a gathering.
Knowing that Christine Rothschild had never wanted to attend UW in the first place, and considering her general dissatisfaction with her life there, It's easy to imagine that Christine may have been feeling more frustrated than ever with the sudden outbreak of violence on her campus. But the opposition to the war and the violence around her wouldn't stay in Madison. Dow Day was a spark that would ignite and quickly spread across the nation. The opposition to the war wasn't just going to fade away now. It was real and it was here to stay, or as stated here in this PBS documentary film titled 2 Days in October.
Now, in the next 3, 4, or 5 months, once you hit 68, everything is going to pop. But I think Wisconsin is the first, and Dow was the bell.
Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest.
Oakland, California, where demonstrators against the Vietnam War tried to close the Army Induction Center. 91 were arrested when some of them tried to block the entrances. Some 240 people were jailed within 4 days of demonstrations in a week of nationwide protests, which ended with a giant rally in Washington. Police moved in quickly to carry off the sit-down protesters. President Johnson denounced the irresponsible acts of violence and declared that American policy in Vietnam would not be changed. Resistance to America's war policy has been growing for some time, but it is only recently that the voices of protest have risen to the surface.
More than 7,000 anti-Vietnam War demonstrators parade near the Los Angeles hotel where President Johnson attends a Democratic fundraising dinner between summit talks with Premier Kosygin.
Afternoon, November 20th, on the San Jose State College campus. What you're watching is the result of a demonstration that began about an hour ago. The Professors Against the War and the Students for Democratic Society had marched in front of the administration building to protest the recruitment on this campus by Dow Chemical Company of employees. The protest was based upon the fact that Dow makes napalm, which is used in warfare in Vietnam.
Rain, humidity, moisture. They're the troublemakers that can take a hairstyle down. But here's how to hold a hairstyle up. White Rain Hairspray. Why, it holds even in the rain. As if there were little umbrellas in the spray. It's that moisture-proof. White Rain holds and holds and holds. White Rain Hairspray holds even in the rain.
As the year 1967 came to an end, things were much the same for Christine and for Linda. Christmas came, and then the new year arrived, 1968. Around the nation, more protests, more Civil War marches, and rising opposition to the U.S. involvement in the war in Vietnam. By late February, even the highly respected news anchor Walter Cronkite concluded publicly that he didn't believe the war could be won.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
Then came the spring of '68. The days leading up to Christine's murder were laced with tragedy. In early April, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Robert Kennedy, who would himself be assassinated 2 months later, announced the news of King's death to a crowd during a campaign stop for his presidential bid.
Very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in.
Linda remembers very clearly the last time she saw her friend Christine. It was a week before finals, 4 days before the murder. It was a Wednesday, and Linda was standing on the sidewalk at Bascom Hall, and Chris was walking up the hill towards her. Linda called out to Chris to get her attention.
She didn't hear it at first, and I yelled her name again, and Chris looked up and smiled and just kind of like gave me the hand like, hi, and I'm on my way up. I saw her then, and I told her, I said, I know we're busy this week, but how about if we just take like a 2 or 3 hour break on Saturday and go to the swim meet? I said, because I still have a load of papers and studying and cramming to do for my exams next week, and I knew she did. And I said, I'm going insane. I got to have something going on. And she said, sounds good to me.
Linda and Chris made arrangements. Linda would call Chris Friday evening and give Chris the exact time of the swim meet, and they would plan their Saturday from there.
She said, fine, I'll see you then. She went to her class and I went to mine, and that was it.
But Linda would not see Christine that weekend. Linda decided to do something different.
Friday morning, I still can't figure this out in my own mind. I decided to go home to work on my term paper that was not even researched at that point, which was a really stupid idea because I came from a home where there were 5 of us living on the first floor. It was 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. So there was no privacy for studying. So the only place I could really work on my term paper was at the kitchen table, where, of course, everybody had to eat. So every time there was a meal, I had to take everything off, put everything back. And I can't understand why I even decided to go home when I had a private dorm room. I had taken my typewriter with me, my research books, everything. I mean, I had a load.
Linda was unable to get Christine on the phone that morning, but she wanted to let her know that she would have to cancel her plans. It was in the days before email, voicemail, and texting, so before heading to the bus station, she did what we all did back then. She wrote Chris a note on paper.
I pulled out a sheet of paper and I wrote her a quick note, and I jammed it between the door and the edge of the door, and I took off and I went home. From Friday, when I got home about noon, let's say, until after midnight on Sunday night, I was working. I was at that kitchen table sweating because I hated the topic I was writing about, and it had to be so long, and it was just on and on.
Late Sunday night, as Linda was working on her term paper, the phone rang in her parents' home.
I can still picture that green thing ringing today. It was on the wall that separated our kitchen from the wall of my parents' bedroom. And I knew my parents would not tolerate that well. So I grabbed the phone as soon as I heard that first ring. And I remember the first words I heard was, is this Linda Tomaszewski? It was. And I said, yes. And he said that his name was Officer Henderson, I believe, from UW Madison Police Department. And he asked if I knew who Chris was. And I said, yes. And I thought it was a prank. I thought somebody that we knew probably had been out drinking and decided to disturb me, knowing that I was home working diligently while they were out drinking. And so I listened for a second, and he talked, and he asked me when the last time I saw Chris was. And then he asked me, he says, do you know anybody who wanted to date Chris that she didn't want to date? And I still wasn't really in tune with what the conversation. And, besides probably saying, yeah, there were a lot of guys, I specifically mentioned somebody that I remembered, one guy who was kind of pesty about Chris. He really, really liked her, but he wasn't harmful in any shape or form. Anyways, and I said his name. And then I made a stupid remark and I still remember that remark, and it's a shameful thing that I can't even figure out why I said it, much less. I said, what did somebody do? Spike or punch at the church dance or something? I said something to that effect. And he didn't, of course, comment, but he said he asked me when I would be back on campus, and then that was it. I didn't think twice about it. It was basically some jerk called me. My parents are probably angry because they're laying in bed thinking, who's calling our house at this time of night? And I just was finishing up my papers. I had junk all over. And then I went to bed.
On Monday morning, Linda woke up at her parents' house, made final touches on her term paper, and prepared to take the bus back to Madison. She recalls that her father always turned on the radio in the morning.
And the very first words I heard was co-ed. I didn't hear anything before that or after that. Those were the first words. And I thought, that's a strange way to talk about a student. I don't know why that stuck in my head as being strange, but it was, instead of saying like a female student, it was like co-ed. And it just sounded kind of proper and, I don't know, unfamiliar to my jargon.
And then Linda comprehended what was being said on the radio. An 18-year-old co-ed at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Miss Christine Rothschild, was found murdered on the UW campus Sunday evening. Shocked, speechless, and disoriented, Linda returned to the UW campus.
That was the whole change in the world. I remember I showered and I changed clothes and I grabbed my paper, and it was like I could feel like I was being bombarded by like sound and light. Everything around me, like the world should be quiet right now. Everybody should be thinking of Chris, or everybody should be mourning or whatever. And as I looked around me, I remember thinking, nobody even cares about Chris. It was like the world kept on. Chris was murdered on Sunday. On Tuesday night was her wake, or the casket is out and people can go to like a funeral home or to a church or whatever and say a prayer. And then the following day is when they usually have like a mass, speakers perhaps, and the burial. I did not go to that on Wednesday, to the sermon or to the cemetery. I went Tuesday night, and I went to the funeral home. It was just a very plain, like stucco room, large room with pews, dark pews, a few, and it had like beams on it, almost European. And the place wasn't that big. And then like 10 feet in front of it was like a little kneeler and a little stand, and the casket was on it.
Before taking a seat at the wake, Linda spoke with Christine's mother briefly. This was a pivotal moment in Linda's life. In many ways, her life's path changed right then and right there.
I sat there, and that's when I promised Chris I was going to figure it all out. I felt that this was a mission that I would undertake because that's what I wanted to do for Chris. And I in my mind, because of what I was hearing, they were already saying how difficult this case was becoming, and no witnesses and no leads and all this stuff. And it was very, very aggravating to me that the world wasn't turned upside down because of Chris. And I figured that in my mind, I guess my ego or my whatever was such that I decided that I can take care of her.
Still yet to come on future episodes of You Killed Chris, One Friend's Fight for Justice.
Why did I even hire this idiot?
Sometimes everything isn't okay.
The very next morning, we called the police department and said, could this be him?
I don't know how Sandy vetted him, but he came, I believe, in March.
He lied about his family. He lied about his role in the World War.
With a gun, and kept on pulling the trigger and the bolt back and forth.
I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure I interviewed a serial killer today. And she was like, here at my house?
Dakota Spotlight is written and produced by me, James Wallner, and is a proud member of the Porchlight Podcast Network. A huge thank you goes out to Linda Shulko for her willingness to share her story with us. Check out her Kindle book, Murder on the 56th Day, available on Amazon.com, Linda donates all her proceeds from the book to charity. She requests you order the Kindle version and not the printed copy, as she no longer has copies available. I also recommend Kevin Damask's book titled Cold, The Unsolved Murders of 7 Young Women. See the links to both books in the show notes. A very special thanks goes out this season to Mari Zoerb Hansen, a 4th-generation UW alum, for all the amazing research, fact-checking, and just stellar assistance with this season. Mari's dedication and hard work on this story is in the memory of her late father, David Zoerb, who was finishing his senior year at UW when Christine was murdered. Thank you, Mari. Contact me by email at dakotaspotlight@gmail.com. Don't miss the amazing Dakota Spotlight Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Dakota Spotlight. This story took place over 50 years ago, and memories undoubtedly have shifted and evolved with time. Individuals impacted by this crime and others who have looked into this case may have different accounts of events in this story. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.